so we're going to begin now to look at a way of communicating the gospel that we really haven't had much of a grip on. Those of you that have your syllabus, if you could open to where it says CP 501, Orality 1, Introduction to Bible Storying. And we're going to read that. Let's start to read through the Introduction to Bible Storying. Emmanuel, we'll start with you. This course is designed
to assist students to grasp the urgency of fulfilling Christ's mandate to go and make disciples of all nations. Matthew 28:19 and 20. This course will instruct students in the how of telling God's big story. Students will learn that traditional ways of teaching the Bible, primarily through Western lecture methods, fall short for the billions of oral learners in the world who do not yet know the story of God. Oral learners in oral cultures learn primarily by listening to and responding to stories. This course teaches literate disciples to understand and appreciate worldviews of oral cultures and to teach them the Bible via Bible storytelling. The course presentations typically include times for students to learn different methods of Bible storytelling dialogue and to practice their skills orally. Students will also learn how to plant missional communities using Bible storying.
So if we think about telling a story versus hearing a sermon, the difference is kind of like, recently I saw a bunch of Kenyans together, they were singing together. When they were singing together in English, it sounded good. When they switched to Swahili, it sounded better. But when they switched to their mother tongue, the joy level just rose. And so for an oral learner to hear the Bible story the way Jesus told it, or the way even the Old Testament writers wrote it, gives a joy, a connecting to their heart that just preaching a sermon doesn't do. Hamza, if you could read through the course objectives for us.
To inspire students with a glimpse into church planting movements around the world that primarily use orality. To give a background, history, and rationale for using orality in some setting instead of preaching. To examine the issues that need to be addressed when teaching or communicating in an oral format. To be able to identify and understand one's own worldview and the worldview of a tribe different than yours. To be able to formulate a Bible storying set that addresses the worldview of the target audience. To become proficient in leading storying sessions and the use of dialogue in such sessions. To learn how to use storying to start discovery Bible studies and to use orality as a church multiplication strategy.
So these are some of the skills that you'll be learning in this class. How to go from a sermon or lesson type of presentation to a storying approach to the gospel. For the most part, we'll be using videos to demonstrate this, but there will be a lot of class practice as you become comfortable and proficient in these skills. Mary, could you read through the graded activities?
All students will receive a letter grade based on the following percentages. Class participation, 20%. Class presentations of Bible stories, 40%. Reflection paper, 10%. Final exam, which includes the group strategy report, group skit, final strategy report, 30%.
So you'll see that the biggest percentage of your grades here will be your own oral presentation in class. And the second biggest one is the final exam that will involve a strategy report. How will you take what you're learning here and use it to impact tribes or people groups that have never heard the gospel? So this will be the main focus of this class. Sonia, if you could just read through today's from the introduction to the homework part. Next page.
Mm, 3:10 to 4, lecture on church planting movements, part 1. 4 to 4:10, break. 4:10 to 5:10, lecture on church planting movement, part 2. 5:10 to 5:30, Luazain, orality video with Bramwell Musia. 5:30 to 6, discussion and practice. Study time. Homework. Write one-page reflection paper of church planting movements. Read Journal of Bible Story, #8. Tuesday, 12.
That's good enough just for today. Thank you. So you'll notice that tonight you have a homework assignment. One of them is to write a reflection paper on the lecture part of today, looking at church planting movements. A reflection paper simply means you are writing how you responded or interacted to the material you heard today. You may include a few facts, but mostly in a reflection paper, I want to know, how did it impact you personally? What did you think about it? What do you think you might do differently in your ministry as a result of having learned this? And then to, of course, read the Journal of Bible Story, number 8, that we'll be discussing tomorrow. Church planting movement. Mary, what does that bring up in your mind, the term church planting movement?
Having house churches be established throughout a region, throughout a large area.
Okay. Emmanuel, what about you?
Well, missionaries going out to start a church, usually a traditional church
Okay.
in any area, and obviously have to give a report to the church that sent them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So missionary-styled approach to planting churches. Hamza, when you hear the term spontaneous church planting movements, how do you feel that might be different than what we've known in a traditional church setting?
I don't know what spontaneous means, so.
Okay, all right, that's okay, because we're just starting the class, so that's okay. Spontaneous means happening almost without anybody interacting or doing a lot to it. It's it just kind of, it appears as though it's happening all of a sudden, just kind of arising out of nowhere. We'll study later, it doesn't really arise out of nowhere, but it happens very rapidly. So with the understanding of spontaneous, how do you think that might be different than a traditional church planting approach?
Because I think for a traditional one, it's something that comes with awareness, where you sit. It might actually take like 10 years to set up the vision that you have sat down and planned, and we want to purchase this land and do this and this and this. But when you say that it's something that happens like the way you have explained, then it's something that it's more of God doing it, and yeah.
Okay, all right, good. what we want to look at and consider is one of the things that slows down the advance of the gospel is expecting the communication of the gospel to all be done by professional clergy whose standard method of delivery is a sermon. And the reason that slows the gospel down is because the numbers of professional clergy who have that training is very small. And they can't be everywhere at once. So how will the gospel break out of where we've enclosed it and actually reach the tribes that haven't had a chance to hear yet? We'll be learning more a little bit later about these tribes that haven't had a chance to hear. But for right now, let's turn our attention to the slides, and Sonia, if you could read the slide up there.
Spontaneous church planting movements. Tell your children about it in the years to come, and let your children tell their children. Pass the story down from generation to generation. Joel 1:3.
Now let me ask you, how many of you can remember a really good sermon you've heard preached somewhere? Anybody?
On a video.
Pardon me?
It was on a video.
It was on a video? Okay. How long ago did you hear that sermon?
I think it was about 2007.
Okay. Today, could you recall that videoed sermon so clearly that you could transmit all the key points to a child? Okay. See, that's where sermons break down. They're not easily transmissible. So only the people who are sitting in the church building or whatever at the time that they hear it or on the video actually get the benefit of it. But Jesus instituted a method that was much more effective to really communicating the gospel. Okay, Hamza, would you go ahead and...
This material is from David Garrison. What is a church planting movement? Church planting movement is a rapid exponential increase of indigenous churches planting churches with a given people group or population segment.
Okay, Mary?
Rapid. Church planting movement occurs with rapid increases in new church starts, exponential. Not simply incremental growth, adding a few churches every year or so. Exponential multiplication. 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 16. Is only possible when churches are planting churches.
See, generally we look at church planting as the job of a pastor or a church planter. But what we're going to learn here is using the orality method of communicating the gospel actually makes it possible to teach entire churches how to go plant another church, rather than having all of that fall on a professional clergy to do it. Sonia?
Indigenous churches, generated from within instead of without. Gospel enters from the outside, but grows from the inside.
We'll learn a little bit more about that a little bit later. Okay, this slide.
What a church planting movement is not. Evangelism that results in churches. One church plant might satisfy evangelical church planter. A revival of existing churches. Evangelistic crusade or witnessing program. Local church planters trained to plant multiple churches among their own people.